Campaign 2018 is sponsored by Wisconsin Hospital Association, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Realtors Association, Marshfield Clinic Health System, AARP Wisconsin, and Campaign 2018 partner Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel.
Democratic Representative Peter Barca of Kenosha is seeking re-election in the 64th Assembly District. Peter, welcome back to WisconsinEye.
Well, great to be with you again, Steve. Welcome to Mount Pleasant here, or Sturtevant area. I represent part of Mount Pleasant and part of Racine and part of the greater Kenosha area. So I'm very fortunate to represent both communities.
I ask incumbent legislators this standard question.
Yes.
If you're re-elected, top priority, top goal in the next session for you?
I would say that it's hard to narrow it to one, but obviously workforce development. I hear from businesses all across the district how vital this is, and obviously right here in the heart of the Kenosha-Racine area, it's absolutely vital. Now on a local area basis, it's housing. We had S.C. Johnson at Wingspread put on a conference where they brought in personnel from Reno, Nevada, and Tahoe, where they had a big surge like we're having at this point in terms of a glut of jobs. They said the single biggest mistake they made was not working more aggressively on housing. So that's what I've been spending a lot of my time over the course of the past couple of months on. But obviously things like if Tony Evers is elected to take the Medicaid money to help improve our medical situation, infrastructure, absolutely vital. So there are many issues that are very important to me that I'm working on right now.
In terms of rural health care, Peter, do you think taking the MA federal cash would be the best way to protect health care in our rural areas?
Well, there's no question. We've turned down roughly $1 billion that we could have had to improve our healthcare system, plus use it to improve reimbursement, which will have more providers involved in the system. So I think that may be the single most important thing that we could do, because I think it was the biggest mistake we made in a generation in Wisconsin by not taking those funds. However, things like telemedicine also can make a difference. Things like scope of practice, where we've passed various provisions to allow other medical providers to cover a broader array of services under the supervision of physicians and dentists, and that's beginning to make a difference too.
Have you been hearing from hospitals and medical providers about our low MA reimbursement rates?
Oh, of course.
Are we at a tipping point where these reimbursement rates could really hurt health care for our MA patients?
Oh, it already is hurting our MA patients dramatically. And I've been hearing about that for some time. But we may be close to that tipping point, as you indicate, because there are many providers that just feel they absolutely can no longer afford to take on MA patients.
The pilot program between the state government and Delta Dental that provides dental care in regional clinics.
Yes.
Are you familiar with that? And if so, should it remain a priority in the next MA budget?
Of course, no question about it. In fact, in Racine, we have a project of that sort. We're very enthusiastic about. That combined with community health centers has made a big impact on delivery of services to low-income people and people of more modest means. In Kenosha, we have a very vibrant community health care center that, when I was a member of Congress, I was able to get the first grant from Secretary Donna Shalala to help start that program. In fact, we just did an anniversary video on their behalf recently, but they take in thousands of dental patients every year. And Racine has been looking at adopting that type of model once again. They had a provider that at one juncture, but they're looking to bring in a new, more vibrant provider at this point.
As a veteran of the Capitol, Peter, are you hearing about an issue from caregivers? AARP estimates that 578,000 Wisconsin residents provide care for a family member or a neighbor. So my question is, would you support laws or rules that require hospitals to recognize and work with family caregivers when a loved one is hospitalized? This is a priority of AARP.
Well, it's something that we certainly have to look at in some way, recognizing what an important need that they in fact provide. AARP is a very important organization in our state, but there are many others, such as even like our local county aging and disability centers, which the governor tried to eliminate in the budget.
ADRCs.
And on a bipartisan basis, we were able to defeat that, thankfully. In fact, I work very closely with our county board chairman, who is a Republican, Rusty Clark here in Racine County, And very important that we maintain those kinds of services. I know when my mother was dying, and were it not for that agency, even I would have had a hard time getting the whole panoply of services that she needed, for her last few weeks of life.
Transportation funding is still an impasse and gridlock in the Capitol. How should it be resolved? What's your plan to pay for our highways?
Well, look, one thing I'm very pleased about is Superintendent Tony Evers is making that a priority in his campaign, and he's indicated he will bring people together, which Governor Walker did do. The difference is Governor Walker never moved forward with any of the recommendations, and there were dozens of them between his commission that he put together and also from Secretary Gottlieb. Superintendent Evers, if he's elected governor, will not only bring together people, but he'll actually move forward with ideas. And he's indicated everything should be on the table. Absolutely, I think that needs to be the case. The one biggest mistake we made, though, was to not go back to a modified version of indexing. I had, as a leader, I had our Democratic members in the Finance Committee bring up motions to restore indexing, but with more accountability. So the Finance Committee would actually have to vote on it, which has been a Republican objection, and rightfully so. But unfortunately, not one single Republican vote to do that. So hopefully we can get a bipartisan coalition this time around to actually make something happen. I mean, frankly, Governor Walker's been the biggest impediment, because even Speaker Voss is supportive of attempting to do something on the revenue side.
Your district borders Illinois. When the subject of tolling comes up in the Capitol, where are you on that?
Well, personally, I think tolling is a viable option. We need to look at tolling as being one of the potential solutions, but it has to be a bipartisan basis. I think in all likelihood, you probably will have divided government to some degree this time around. I think the governor, I think there's a very good chance, given the polling, that we'll either win the governor's seat or the state senate, maybe both. And if that wave keeps growing, possibly the assembly as well. But in all likelihood, you'll have divided government. So we have to find a solution we can all agree on. But Speaker Voss and myself, as a Democratic leader at that time, did push to try and have Congress analyze putting forward a study to ensure that we looked at tolling as one option. And I agree with the retailers. I don't think you want to have tolling if you do move forward where you have a toll at every exit. I think that's counterproductive. It's expensive. But I think you could look at some variations on a theme. And I know in some of the New England states, they get over 40% of their revenue from people driving in from other states. And we pay when we cross the border in Illinois, so there's no reason why they shouldn't help us, just like we've helped them revenue-wise.
The levy limits to control property taxes that local governments have been living with for 14, 15 years. Time to keep them, dial them back, loosen them, or get rid of them?
Well, I think it's time to analyze how they're working, where the shortfalls might be. Realistically, I think you're going to continue to have revenue limits, but you could look at things like police and fire services, where we've been extremely pinched in both the Kenosha and Racine area, where as we've grown, especially in the Kenosha County area, there's a crying need for more police and fire services. But because of the expenditure limits as well as the revenue caps, it really has hamstrung our mayors and our village officials and others from being able to move forward with that. So we do need to at least analyze all those options. And I think, again, that's where I think, if you have a new governor that will bring people together to analyze that, it would make a big difference. Or if Governor Walker is reelected, maybe he'll, go to that type of approach. He hasn't utilized it very often, unfortunately.
We're only a few miles from the proposed Foxconn campus. It's not in your district, but 11 months after you cast that vote for those incentives, are you still convinced it was the right vote?
Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm more convinced than ever. I mean, if anything, Foxconn has dug deeper roots. I talked with Chancellor Blank, who is very enthusiastic about the $100 million investment they made in the UW system. Obviously, that $100 million venture fund where Foxconn's teaming up with Johnson Controls, Aurora Advocate Healthcare, and Northwestern Mutual tells me that they want to have collaborative efforts, work with other organizations and institutions. They put forward $1 million fund that they announced at UW Parkside, where I've been on the board for almost 20 years. So they're looking to expand their reach. Now, had I been able to help negotiate that, or they involved the Democrats, I think we could have had a better deal for the taxpayers. But in my judgment, certainly for the Greater Racine area that I represent, there's no question it's already been a huge plus with the investments that have been made locally.
In the wake of the Foxconn tax benefits and breaks package, Kimberly-Clark wants basically the same type of tax breaks. Now, I think on February 22nd, you voted against the Kimberly-Clark bill. How is that different than Foxconn?
Oh, it's dramatically different. With Foxconn, first of all, and the academics were the most enthusiastic about that, about bringing this new technology to North America and right here in the Racine-Kenosha area. You know, from the president of Marquette to the president of the UW system, the chancellor of Parkside, Brian Albrecht, who's president of Gateway right in this building. They were all enthusiastic because they recognized the benefit of bringing this technology here. So it seems to me that there's going to be a huge technological advantage to us as we move forward.
The current state budget passed by the Republicans, which you didn't vote for, did include $600 million more for K-12 state aid to our public schools. Are public schools still underfunded? Do we need another major aid package next session?
There's no question they're underfunded because, you know, Governor Walker took over $1 billion out of the public schools, so he's barely made up for it at this juncture. So there's no question that we do need to have an infusion of funds. And again, I will cite Superintendent Evers, who I think has been an excellent superintendent of public instruction. And the budget that he's bringing forward, I think, is exactly the prescription we need. When I was in the legislature during my first tenure, I fought vigorously to maintain special education funding at 63%. And we always kept it around 60%. Now we're down below 20% or around 20%. So that hamstrings so many districts because it's a very expensive kind of service to provide, but of course very necessary. Additionally, to go back to 2/3 funding, which I know Superintendent Evers has set as a goal, which only Governor Tommy Thompson had ever achieved, also would help property taxpayers and help the quality of education. So very vitally important.
So you support Mr. Evers' recommendation for an additional $600 million for special ed in the next session?
Yes, very vigorously.
Okay. The debate over prisons, Peter. We have 2 prisons built in the 1800s. Some Democratic candidates for governor said we could cut our prison population over years by 50%. Do we need a new state prison?
Well, I don't think we need to add significant capacity. I do think, though, that it is true that some of these aging prisons are going to have to be replaced at some juncture. So we have to look at that. But we need to look in its totality at our criminal justice system and to look to, unfortunately, it pains me to say, but look to southern states like Texas who passed prison reform, or Oklahoma, who has a major initiative underway now that they're analyzing putting forward, and find ways so that certainly we want to keep violent offenders locked up where they belong to protect public safety, but people who are nonviolent offenders, there are alternative methods. In fact, in Kenosha County, we have a pilot program for opioid addiction to have people take alternative sentencing where they submit to a pharmacological approach, which has been remarkably successful. I've had a bill to that degree, and I'm so proud of our local officials for instituting that. It was supported on a broad base of both conservatives and progressives in our Kenosha County Board. Those are the kinds of prescriptions that we need to look to.
UW system budget. We've had a tuition freeze on resident undergraduate tuition for 6 years. The governor would like to extend it for a 7th and 8th year. Your position?
I'm for extending that freeze, but only if you fund the freeze. You can't continue to starve the UW systems. Chancellor Debbie Ford, I thought, said it best. In the information age, about the worst thing you could do is to cut your investments in higher education. And more than ever before, our UW system campuses, including Parkside right here locally, have set up remarkable partnerships with private industry. And those private-public partnerships, to me, are some of the greatest chances we have for maintaining our competitive edge, not only nationally, but globally. So absolutely, we need to ensure that we're investing in the UW system. I'm all for maintaining a freeze, but only if you fund the freeze.
The $100 million in grants, in school safety grants, is that enough, or do we need to change gun laws?
Well, look, I think that we do have to look at sensible changes. I mean, even President Trump wants to ban bump stocks, But unfortunately, in this state, we can't find the wherewithal to do things that even conservatives, like the conservative governor of Florida, did, such as that. But in terms of school safety, obviously those kinds of changes, sensible laws would make a difference. But I think the school safety grants were a success. I mean, I don't think our Attorney General did such a smashing job as he would like to say, because I think he took too long to award the kinds of grants that were needed, because some of the schools got them after the school year started this coming year. But I do think that they were a sensible approach to take to allow school districts to bring forward their own initiatives. I know Kenosha and Racine both took advantage of it with our unified districts, but so did some of the rural districts, and so did some of the private schools. Shoreland Lutheran, I helped them. No, not Shoreland Lutheran, excuse me, the Christian Life. Mm-hmm. I helped them with their proposal to try to ensure that they had received some funds, which I know they're very appreciative for.
The bills in the Capitol that would legalize both recreational and medical marijuana, your positions?
Well, we are, I think, very wisely having a referendum both in Kenosha and in Racine County on medical marijuana. From my standpoint, I think it's far more prudent to analyze what's going on in these other states to find out whether or not it's been successful, whether it is a gateway drug. But I do support the idea of medical marijuana. Even my 85-year-old mother, before she died, told me, Peter, you have to do this. We have so many family friends who suffered so terribly with cancer and other diseases, and why shouldn't they be able to use it when they have a serious medical condition? But we'll find out what the referendum shows, but my prediction is it'll probably pass by 70% or more, because that's what the public polls are showing. We did pass the CBD oil. I think that was a good move, but I think we should look to go to medical marijuana.
Differences between you and the Constitution Party candidate running against you?
Well, it's an interesting question, because I haven't met him, I haven't seen him. I've been to over 200 events since we filed our papers. Everything from church festivals to the Interfaith Coalition putting on various programs, to great conversations on racial dialogue, to ribbon cuttings for the Chamber of Commerce. I haven't seen him anywhere, so I'm not sure what his position is on virtually anything, other than I know he chided me in the only letter he wrote to the editor, because I was Labor Person of the Year, saying we don't need organized labor anymore. Well, I think he's sadly mistaken on that. But beyond that, I have no idea what he stands for. I haven't met him yet.
Democratic Representative Peter Barca of Kenosha, seeking re-election in the 64th Assembly District. Peter, thank you for talking to WisconsinEye.
Great to be with you.
Thank you.
Campaign 2018 is sponsored by Wisconsin Hospital Association, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Realtors Association, Marshfield Clinic Health System, AARP Wisconsin, and Campaign 2018 partner Milwaukee Journal Sentinel.